So the next session for today, we are going to recap some of the highlights from the Phocuswright conference. So Carolina and I will both share some perspectives and some learnings that came out of the event. We're going to start by queuing up the opening video that we showed just before our center stage program. So Gene, go ahead and queue up that video. So that video always makes me dream of travel. So the Phocuswright Conference Online 2020 happened over 2 weeks in mid-November. And the first week consisted of Diversity and Leadership, our Young Leaders Summit, and Innovation Day. And the second week was dedicated to Center Stage and small group topical roundtables. As you could see in the video, the theme was to the brink and back, and we explored how quickly the industry went from the mountaintop at the end of 2019 to the edge of a cliff in March and April of this year. And then the steps that companies have been taken to ease back away from the brink. So there were many highlights from the event, and Carolina and I will share a few of our key takeaways. For me, I really enjoyed the innovation pitches and the technologies that are being developed to address some of the biggest friction points caused by the pandemic. So we saw companies focused on providing business travel, COVID-related content into the booking flow. We saw contactless hotel tech, airline retailing platforms, a travel healthcare platform, and many more. And the winner of Summit, which was our startup pitch, was a company called TrueFace, which is a facial recognition technology that helps airports manage crowds and security, and also helps hotels and other travel suppliers recognize their VIPs, maybe when they walk into a property. The winner of Launch, which is our product launch event for established companies, was Cloudbeds, a software as a service technology company that helps independent hotels, small chains, some short-term rental properties manage pricing, inventory, booking, etc. Our diversity and leadership program focused on hiring and recruitment this year and featured a really inspiring interview with Google's director of executive recruiting. We also offered an invite-only he/for/she male ally skills workshop, which I was fortunate enough to participate in, and that was led by Simon Gallo, who works for the UN Women UK organization. And as far as highlights go across center stage, I'd say for me, it was Brad Gerstner's interview of Jason Kalakanis, who's one of the most successful angel investors. Jason told some great stories about how he loaned money to Elon Musk to help him save SpaceX and Tesla from insolvency, if you can believe that, during the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009. He also expressed a really optimistic view about the recovery of travel in Q3 and Q4 of next year. And there's a ton of highlights from the conference, and we actually captured a few of them on video. So, Gene, if you have that video handy, go ahead and cue that up, and we'll play the highlight video.
Us, like every other business, do we have enough cash? How's our liquidity? Are we going to be able to make it through a prolonged downturn? Did some renegotiation, raise some money? Check, got that. So I can sleep at night knowing the company will be around. Looking forward, look, Google has used their unfair advantage as a gatekeeper to most of the internet to drive a lot of traffic into their funnel at the expense of everyone else. We see the government taking some excellent actions there. I think that's great for the health of the internet, yes, in travel, but in really all categories as Google expands their view.
Look, hotels are probably in a better position than the airlines in the short term because people still need a place to stay when they're not home. So, in the short term, rates may be depressed, but the demand is going to come back. It's the airlines that have a much more difficult position because they have a lot of variable costs associated with each flight. And the business traveler who usually paid for those flights, I think is further off to the horizon in terms of coming back into the marketplace. But hotels are going to be just fine.
So we're going to see that now. We're going to see a big shakeout next year. And who do you think's most vulnerable?
I hope so. I think the companies that were average and were not well financed either, and were not terribly great at execution, will be weeded out, and they should be. And that's what a good downturn does. What I hate seeing though is travel suppliers being weeded out as part of that process.
It's a buzzword. I think that if you think of it, is we're providing as much comfort as possible to get people back on planes, back into the hotels, and back traveling. And there's this whole myth of the risk, and it just deals with consumer confidence. And obviously, if there's no corporate travel, that stops most of us dead in the tracks of traveling. If that confidence factor comes back through rapid testing, through the vaccine now, and through us taking better care and providing solutions, that's the way that we need to continue forward. But I do believe that there's still a service component, and there's still interaction need. So I always look at convenience on the one hand, facilitating, but also still having touch points, because it's still about a human experience.
But really, we got a confidence gap amongst customers here, and we need to establish some comfort level, not as just individuals, but as an industry. And I think a lot of people landed on the virtual health passport. And I laugh at this a little bit as a technologist. This could actually be, beyond currency and Bitcoin, the first real blockchain solution in terms of following you along as a traveler and then informing you of things like contact tracing and other things that were going on.
This thing's going to be in our rearview mirror very quickly. And I think the idea that there would ever be another global pandemic is something we should aspire to, is a zero pandemic world. We should have the early warning system, and we should be acting globally, all leaders, that when there is the sign of a pandemic, we know how to shut down borders very quickly. Sorry to say this at a travel conference, so that we can play the long game economically.
So a lot of really great stuff there, Carolina. What were some of the key takeaways from your perspective?
Well, Pete, now just watching this, for me, the conference had this bittersweet feeling this year, right? I think it goes without saying that why it was bitter, but sweet because first we got to see Steve Hafner's doing the conference from his daughter's playroom. So it's a nice change of scenario as well. But most of the players are still here. We're fighting the good fight to come back from the brink. And some consequences might actually be beneficial for the medium and long-term tourism. So I think we have some really good outcomes. A lot was discussed about how 2020 is going to look like. Although vaccination has already started, and this is an incredible achieving in such a short time, we know that it's going to take most of the year to get the vaccine to the large part of populations. That means that 2020 will remain a weird year, with travelers still needing reassurance that trips are safe and also worthwhile. Consumer confidence remains the main concept here, as we've seen from these short highlights that we watched. So businesses should be careful, because over-optimism without proper planning can be harmful. As for Latin America, some countries haven't even started to plan properly for vaccine distribution. And we know that tourism recovery is totally dependent on that. Another thing that was very present in the discussion was the low-touch economy. Charuto presented that as a trend as well, and how it is shaping contactless tourism. And the big takeaway here for me is that digital consumer journey is now on steroids, and it needs to be engaging. So the highlight is not to be digital, that is a given, but to be digitally engaging. And also the hybrid format for conferences is here to stay, much like we saw in the Asia panel during the conference at the Marina Bay Sands. So it was really good to have that taste as well. In Latin America, what's happening is that more and more consumers have access to internet and smartphones now, are getting more used to using those tools. And therefore, we need to improve our mobile experiences a little further in travel. One thing that really got my attention, and is the talk of the day, is that investors panels and during the interviews, the private accommodation sector was in the spotlight. So the strong signs from the Airbnb IPO, the OTAs and metas looking closer at this market, and the VCs focusing on investments in this segment. So I believe that traditional hotel market has to up its game. And in some cities, it might not make sense to build a new hotel, since the private accommodation offer is so adaptable. It's smart in the way it uses resources, and it's getting more and more consumer traction. It is also true in Latin America. We are seeing the growth of private accommodation sector, a lot of new management companies for that segment, and a lot of real estate developers have shifted their attention from the traditional hotel model to the private accommodation as an easier way to finance projects. And finally, for me, this was the year of the travel subscription talk. So we have TripAdvisor detailing its program, Glenn Fogel talking about the future of Genius, Be Right Back presenting at Summit, all of them with different models. But as Kevin May said during the conference, the Netflixation of travel. So it remains to be seen how it will all play out for consumers, what value this model can actually bring to the table. And if it is financially feasible, but it's definitely something to watch. So yeah, Pete, it was bittersweet, but full of things to consider as usual.
Yeah. So one thing that was a little bit unique about this year was we hosted a future-proofing think tank to really sit down and talk about what the industry needs to do to speed up recovery and ultimately future-proof our businesses as well as the industry against the next pandemic. And the objectives were to provide a customized briefing for industry leaders, to provide a forum for really rapid immersion into the most pressing issues, and ultimately to allow the participants of this think tank to think more boldly about how to drive their businesses as well as the industry forward. So we conducted 2 small group breakout sessions, and there were about 5 to 6 participants per session. The first breakout was focused on the traveler journey. And we reviewed a journey map and looked at some of the biggest friction points that are present within that customer journey. The second breakout was focused on future-proofing and the future-proofing pyramid, where we brainstormed around what travel businesses and the industry needs to do to build from the basics all the way back up to future-proof. The think tank participants were really a who's who of the travel industry, from hotel distribution and marketing leaders to destination experts to travel agency founders to airline innovation experts. And we asked each of them to say a word about where they thought the industry was today and to describe what the post-pandemic future might look like for travel. And today's words ranged from uncoordinated to resilient to resolved, and exhausted, I think, was another one that popped up. Future words were resilient, revitalized, and customer focused. And there were a ton of really interesting findings and anecdotes that came out of the think tank. During the friction points breakout, we established a few trends. Time horizons between shopping and booking have changed significantly. The real lack of relevant information in real time. And ultimately, travelers lack confidence. I think that was probably the biggest takeaway. And until they find it safe to travel, we're going to be kind of in this recovery stall. And obviously, the vaccine will really help with that. During the pyramid breakout, we discussed how the industry and destinations need to implement strategies to speed up recovery. And we kind of built that by level. And at the basic level, we discussed cleanliness protocols and kind of a unified lobbying effort. As we moved up to a more bold level, we got into a little bit more frictionless tech, and we talked a bit about health passports. For Bulletproof, really kind of digging into maybe a public-private partnership to create that industry voice and really help with lobbying efforts, as well as impacting structural changes. And lastly, how can we truly build back better? What are some of the things that we can do to impact climate change and enhance the traveler experience and really regain traveler confidence, which is going to require an industry-wide communication effort. So it'll be interesting to see if we can implement some of these changes and strategies as we kind of go toward recovery and get closer and hopefully a much brighter second half of 2021. So speaking of 2021, Carolina, it'll be interesting to see what topics we are discussing at next year's conference. So I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball and let us know what the topics will be for next year.
Yeah, this is the $1 million question, right? But I think we should do something easier for us. We have to do the brink and back part 2, the comeback, right? So this year we talk mostly about the brink and how is the view from there, right? So some are closer, some are further away, but definitely our sector is there. So for the 2020 conference, we'll have a lot of comeback conversations. We might not even have all the usual players at the conference. We might be discussing the consolidation and acquisitions that happened in the year. We might also be discussing how distribution has rearranged itself and how OTAs now have a harder challenge to present their value proposition for both clients and suppliers. We will certainly discuss what the new corporate travel looks like. Companies have lower budgets available, new habits kicked in, and now traveling for business is not always necessary or even desired. Quality of life plays a larger role in that decision-making, as well as economic factors, right? We might analyze the good after effects of the pandemic and how it helped control over-tourism, for example. Even with destinations having plenty of tourists again, we have this new behavior accelerated by the pandemic, like pre-booking a tourist attraction or even a beach. And we might expect to do that more and more often in the future, helping them contain over-tourism and maybe leading some cities to even consider total load capacity using the pandemic as a good excuse. We will also discuss the immunity passports, how they're playing out, and which DMOs are working better to attract the protected traveler in a fierce competition between them, right? And hopefully there will be naturally more space in the main conference to discuss diversity, inclusion, empathy, because as travel companies, we have to become more and more aware of our protagonism role in this positive change. In the same way, we should also be discussing our role in a green and responsible attitude towards traveling that helps contain the climate change effects. And finally, I think we'll discuss what Jason mentioned in his panel. Are we ready for the pandemic era? Do we have the crisis handbook ready for the next outbreak? I think this is it, but we know for sure that a lot can happen in a year, and it can change a lot from here till then. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed hearing the Phocuswright conference highlights and how they fit as well into Latin America. And yeah, back to you, Pete, for closing our good afternoon.
Yeah, and the most important thing I think about next year is we hope to see everybody back there in person, where we can actually greet each other and see each other. And it's a lot easier to network when you're face to face rather than Zoom screen to Zoom screen. But we'll have to manage with that in the near term. So Phocuswright developed LatAm Talks to bring together the community of travel leaders that are focused on the Latin America market. And after seeing the growing number of LatAm travel leaders year after year at our in-person event, we knew that this unique region really deserved its own dedicated event. And over the course of the last few hours, this resilient group shared experiences, discussed and debated data and trends, and gained a consensus on what it'll take to bring back travel and tourism to the region. We really appreciate the relationships we have built with you all, our event partners, PM Web and ALO, as well as our close friends at Mapie, to surface the unique challenges and opportunities the Latin America travel market faces as we navigate this pandemic. We hope that today's focus on the region and gathering of relevant players to the table was impactful. And although we have covered LatAm in our research for many years and had a lot of relevant content at our events and on Phocuswire, this was a first for us, but it definitely will not be the last. And maybe next year we can come down and see you all in person in Rio de Janeiro, beginning in early December. So Carolina and Trisha, you can start working on that. We've also just published the Latin America Travel Market Report, which has some market size projections through 2024. And as an attendee of the event, you can save 30% on that report. So you just need to go to Phocuswright.com and you can use the VIP code LATAM-30 during checkout. Or you can email us and if you have any questions. So Phocuswright really strives to have a comprehensive worldview of the market, and Latin America represents a really important part of that. So thanks for being with us. Thanks for hanging in there with our first virtual LatAm talk, and we look forward to seeing you all in person, hopefully with a recovering travel industry in the second half of 2021.